What do you imagine when you hear the word gentrification? Now, I'm guessing that you probably imagine skyscrapers, rich neighborhoods, or even overpriced coffee. But what you don't imagine are home evictions and the rebranding of certain towns like the one that we're documenting today, Bangsar South. So here are some facts about Bangsar South. It isn't actually Bangsar. It is originally called Kampung Kerinci and it is located at the south of the border of Bangsar, beside the Kerinci Highway. Honestly, it isn't even in Bangsar. But due to heavy gentrification, it is being rebranded and resold as Bangsar South. To understand the true value of the name Bangsar, we met up with a few individuals who have given life to this place. We started at APW, one of Bangsar's central masterpieces, to understand the development of its earlier days. Now, it used to be a printing factory, but now it is a cool event space that has been remodeled, rebranded and repurposed to hold cafes and cool events such as We're in the City once a month.
So, APW, which is our printing works, essentially were primarily book printers. For the 60s and 70s, they invested very strong technology in doing volume printing. So we were responsible for printing school textbooks. So the stuff that you had in your math and English textbooks were all printed here. They stopped investing in the early 90s and things started to stagnate. So when I came back, I was like, hey, things aren't looking so swell anymore. I had to then look at restructuring and repurposing the business.
Sungwei has lived his entire life in Bangsar, and growing up, he has experienced Bangsar change from a small town to a behemoth of culture it is today.
Yeah, so I'm 38 this year, so I practically spent most of my life living and growing up in Bangsar. I went to university when I was 20, so a good 20 years of my life was really a part of Bangsar. So before the establishment of Bangsar Village and many other things, there were a lot of street vendors and hawker streets just sprawling around Bangsar. So you grew up eating asam laksa with rats around you. So obviously that was a kind of like a big era in our life, right? And then after many years, something changed because there was new development that came out, new construct, new hardware. And obviously then you had new tenants and new community coming through. And then Bangsar became this really kind of like cool niche sort of community district that everybody wanted to either be seen or do business. And that's been quite representative for the last good 15 years. Bangsar as a district was really filled with rubber trees. These lands were then cleared and then development started to happen. And why here? If you look at the land, it's very flat, right? It's not hilly. So you could build these sort of terrains. Whereas the other part of Bangsar is all very hilly, and that's where residential started happening.
Sungwei mentioned that Bangsar has always been home to him. But ever since development started, Bangsar is a place where the cool and trendy would meet. Just behind APW Bangsar, we talked to Rose Chu, who's the General Manager of Advertising in NST for the past 9 years.
You know, Bangsar South used to be known as the Lan Kwai Fong of KL. You know Lan Kwai Fong in Hong Kong? Right? Yeah, you know Bangsar, now that where all the La Bodega, the antique podium, right? Now it's all breakfast shop, right? It used to be like the party place. So that's why it gives the whole perception of, you know, being trendy, party, right? Yeah. Bangsar is such a location that is so strategic, is right in the middle of KL and PJ.
Yes.
Okay. So it's like if you stay in Bangsar, you are just 15 minutes away from 1U and the whole PJ stuff, and you are just 15 minutes away from KL. That is why it's such a good location. So, you know, hence that's why the surrounding just kind of get the chain reaction.
We can see the appeal of Bangsar and why it turned out the way it is today. Its strategic location and thriving community are the main driving factors of why Bangsar is such a valuable place. We met up with Jemima, a friend of mine who has been living in Bangsar for her entire life, to understand how gentrification has affected Bangsar.
I don't really hang out in Bangsar. Why? Because Bangsar is a very expensive place. You have to be rich to live here, and the population of people are mostly middle class to high class in Bangsar. If you have money, you can spend it and you can enjoy Bangsar, but if you don't, Bangsar is not a place to spend your night at. I would go to other areas outside of Bangsar, Old Klang Road and Taman Desa, those areas. So you need money to live in Bangsar. If you don't, you're just gonna suffer. I would say there's not much in physical development going on in Bangsar because Bangsar has limited space. With the household name of Bangsar, that happening and popular and rich name, they're using that to build at other areas nearby in Bangsar. So now you have Bangsar South. Bangsar South is not actually in Bangsar, but they have used that name to make that place a little bit more atas, richer. So the only way to build Bangsar is to reach outside of Bangsar and call that Bangsar South.
Located just down south of Bangsar, Kampung Kerinci consisted mostly of low-cost flats and government-subsidized units. Cheryl and Mrs. Simala has lived in Pandai Dalam for practically their whole lives, an area that has been affected by the developments happening at Kampung Kerinci.
See, this whole area is developed by UOA, right? Okay, so what I think they saw opportunity in Bangsar South with the LRT. You kind of get it more conducive. You had the federal highway just down. You had Bangsar area itself just down. So I think that sort of maybe started the developer to develop this area. And they were also smart. Maybe they felt that if they developed this area, okay, you'll have Bangsar residents coming here. And because this area is very accessible from federal highway, so you have people who are going elsewhere for their night out or elsewhere for their dinner, now they're coming here, which is exactly what's happening.
But Bangsar South, that area, before it was developed into Bangsar South, what was the original name?
There was no name. This whole area was just Jalan Kerinci. There was no name.
It was called Kampung Kerinci for a while.
Yeah. As I said, now you can't visualize it. Of course, the first apartments that you see on your right, they maintain what they are. So those, I would say, somewhat low-cost flats. The earlier plan was to have those flat owners leave. See what the developer did when they initiated Bangsar South. Okay, now it's like a big urban area as you drive in. Yes. Okay, so but when you drive the other part of, I said, the area has not been untouched, it's an opposite of what it is now. And that was what Pantai Park used to be.
Mrs. Himala is right. If you drive down from Kampung Kerinci and on to Bangsar South, you will see two very different places existing next to each other. So it kind of makes us wonder, at whose expense does gentrification cost?
Just few months back, we received a 4-star excellent.
Wow.
We received from this one is a convention community strata in KL. Only four buildings received this one.
Wow. Wow, I'll be damn proud.
Yeah, sure. I definitely proud.
This is Harith. He's the secretary for the Board of Committees under the Block 2 Vista Angkasa flat, a low-cost flat that was recently awarded a certificate of excellence in their efforts of managing their community. But sadly, what most people don't know is that it's also one of the many flats that is about to be evicted and demolished in order to make room for Bangsar South's ongoing development. In terms of development, then let's talk about Bangsar then. This place, what was it? This place is being rebranded as Bangsar South, correct?
Bangsar South, yes.
What was it called back then?
Previously, it was during squatters, they call it Kampung Kerinci. If you walk through the federal highway, at the signboard there, Kampung Kerinci, you can still find that name there. As soon as you came here, no more kampung, Bukit Kerinci. Further up, Bangsar South.
Yeah. But right now they are selling this area as Bangsar South.
Bangsar South.
Yeah, why?
I don't know. You have to ask all these pemaju developer.
But what do you think? As a planner, you sort of have your own.
I don't agree. I prefer to use that Bukit Kerinci. If you see the surrounding area, development around this area, it's a waste lah if you sell your units.
But what is the disadvantage of calling it Bangsar South though?
Mostly Malay lah staying around this area. Bangsar South is like what you call English name? Maybe English names it.
Yeah.
Bangsar South.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is a very elitist.
If you have a parent from kampong or your uncle from kampong come over, you want to want to say that Bangsar South will be difficult. Is it? It's Kerinci or easier.
Yeah. I heard that they might need to demolish this place and
Yes.
evict people.
Yeah.
What is that for? Yeah.
Demolish, make it. Maybe new malls, new hotel.
What will happen then? Like if you're staying here,
Those things, you have to move out, temporary units. Then you come back over here. Same like they done in KL Gateway Mall.
now that eviction has to happen to them, they'll temporarily live in a place, then they'll have to come out to this place. If they come back here and they cannot afford to stay over here, then what happens to them?
If you
Let's say that if they cannot afford to live over here, what happens?
you have to take the units. Effort is the second option lah. First option you have to take. If you reject your units, a lot of waste.
Yeah.
From one bedroom units, pick and S units, 4-story, 1 bedroom, and see the new design, comfortable. I don't think people will reject.
In 5 years' time, Vista Angkasa and the surrounding low-cost and government-funded flats will be demolished, leaving residents with the possibility of paying the surcharge of 400% of their unit's original price to continue to stay in their homes. Many older residents have chosen to move back to their hometowns, defeating the purpose of development that should be geared towards the rakyat.
As Mr. Harif breaks down the logic behind the eventual acceptance of gentrification in Kampung Kerinci, we came to a conclusion that change is part of development that cannot be escaped. And this process has its own consequences that are irreversible, like generational poverty due to the higher cost of living among the lower income groups, or the loss of old traditions. So, in a way, the rebranding of Kampung Kerinci to Bangsar South may not seem like the biggest issue out there, but it is through names that people find their identities. So the next time when you're traveling in an area that is being gentrified, maybe you could stop and ask yourself, what identities are the developers trying to bring in and trying to get rid of? And maybe, just maybe, next time we will be able to know what to speak for and speak against for the development of our country.